What's good, YouTube? Back again with another GUDS garden episode. Before we get into it, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'm getting right into it. Last week's episode, I pretty much just gave a tour of the garden, what my current setup looked like, and what my ideas for the upcoming year would be. I also gave a list of the things that you can currently do right now in your garden that will help you get the process started and go ahead and get prepared. So those are the things that I want to go over in this video. I'm going to briefly go over that list and why it's important. At the end of me going over that list, I'm going to show you how exactly I got that list completed in my situation. So make sure you're following along, compare what you did to what I did. Feel free to comment on if there's anything that you feel like that I could have missed or I could have improved on. And then at the end of the video, I'm also going to go over what I decided my landscaping is going to be and how I came to that point and what I'm going to do over probably the next 3 months to get. All right, so getting into that list, number one, the first thing you want to do if you've had a garden before, if you grew something last year, is one, take the pros and cons of your garden last year. You really want to sit down maybe for a couple hours and figure out what went well, what didn't go well, and what kind of things you want to improve on based off of what you did last time. Number two, you want to figure out exactly what you want to grow. And number three is figure out where you want to grow these things. The next thing you want to do is take inventory. So this is number four, take inventory of what you currently have. It's just things like what seeds you have, what plants you're currently growing, what kind of tools you have, what kind of pots, things like that. So number five would be I'm writing down a list of everything that you need to be able to tie all those things together. So what things in your inventory that you're missing, what seeds that you need to grow, what you want to grow, and what kind of things you need to make sure that the area that you're growing in is as good as possible. And the last thing that you want to do is put yourself on a schedule. So the next part of the video, I'm just going to go into a little more depth about each one of those steps and how I was able to accomplish those steps this week. And then you can compare what you did this week and see if there's something that you can improve on, or even comment in the section down below and let me know if there's anything that I can improve on as well. So first off, just want to apologize about the sound. I know it's not the clearest. I'm hoping to have a mic in before I actually start recording my next videos. But I just want to apologize about that. If you could just bear with me for the time being, I'm going to try to make it as clear as possible. But if it's not clear, I do apologize about that. But we can go ahead and get into that list. So I don't actually have anything growing that I grew in my last growing season. So what I'm going to do is flip to a couple clips of what I grew last year, and then I'll explain the process. So for this step, it's not real complicated at all. Really what you want to do is just take a recap of last growing season. If you had a journal, then you should be able to just refer to your notes to see what went well, what didn't go well, you know, what dates you fed things, what dates you planted things. And then just refer to those notes and then make adjustments on how you want to improve on those things this year. Like example for me would be just improving on like the sturdiness of my plants. I actually lost my tomatoes really early in the season with a hurricane just because they weren't secured enough. And then my feeding schedule as well. So those are some things that I'm going to improve on this year in my garden. All right, we're to the next one. So this is probably my favorite part, honestly. So this is the part where you choose what you actually want to grow. So what I do is, and this part is, it's really simple. I got a list, and I'll show the list in a second. But what you can do is just, use your imagination. I go on YouTube. I look at other people that are growing things. I look on Google. I pretty much just try to have as big of imagination as I can. Imagine what I want the garden to look like. Imagine what I want to eat next year. Like, what would I be happy that I'm eating in a couple months, or in the next 6 months, or the next year, or what I'm able to preserve and save. Like, think about those things in the future, what you really want to grow and how you would enjoy that growing season. And then that's when you make your list of what you actually want to grow. So I'll show my list. The way I did it is, so if you can see, what I do is I just do it by basically just the generic vegetables. So the first thing I have is peppers, but I got ×5. So I plan on growing 5 variety of peppers. So I plan on growing like banana peppers, jalapeno peppers, habaneros, Carolina Reapers, bell peppers. So that's the 5 different variety of peppers that I plan on growing. Same thing with cucumbers. I plan on growing 3 different types of cucumbers, 2 different types of tomatoes, 2 different types of kale. And I just kind of go down the list of everything that I want to grow. You can see like herbs, I got ×10, so there's multiple herbs that I want to grow. But I just really write down a list of everything that I want to grow, whether I'm able to or not. Just get a little bit over ambitious with it, try to push yourself, challenge yourself. And then once you got that list taken care of, then you just kind of dwindle it down based off of if you got enough space to do it, or if you're going to have enough time to actually be able to grow all those things. So that's really the easiest way to make the list, in my opinion. I challenge people to challenge themselves, make a list that you don't think that you can actually keep up with, and then figure out a way to keep up with it so you can kind of push yourself to be able to grow more and more and be able to provide more produce. All right, so for this part we're talking about where the garden is to be located, or where you want your garden to be located. And before I turn around and show my setup, I just want to give like a couple quick tips of how to choose the right spots. That way you're not like moving the garden that you already had set up and you're having to move it like sometime down the road. A good indicator for me, so I'm in the northern hemisphere, and I'm in what's called like zone 7B for hardiness, so it's in North Carolina. So typically what you can do, especially like in the United States anyway, is you want to take the south side facing side of whatever building that you're living in. So if you're in an apartment complex and your balcony is on the south side of the building, then that's going to probably be an ideal spot for you to be able to grow some things in pots on your balcony. And then if you have a yard or a house, the south side facing of the building or the house is where like you're going to be able to get the most sunlight. So that's a good thing to live by. I'm not sure if anybody's heard this growing up, but like the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So the easiest way that you can find out which direction it is pull your phone out. If you got a smartphone, you probably got a compass on it. But if you want to do it a more natural way, is to go outside at different parts of the day and see what parts of your yard or what parts of your space or your balcony that the sun hits throughout different parts of the day. So I think the best time to check is like 6 a.m., 9 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., and then 6 p.m. So you should have, if you check at those times, pretty much a couple days in a week whenever it starts to get towards the springtime, then you should have a good idea about where like the sun is going to hit for the most part in your garden. So I'm gonna switch the camera around real quick and give a couple other tips too as I show like the space that I got for like all my garden stuff, like where my raised beds are at, and kind of how I pick those spaces. And then hopefully that'll give a good indicator of how you can pick the next spot in your garden as well. So here's a quick look at the setup that I got on my yard. So this is one garden box right here, and then like I showed in my previous video, here's my second garden box. And then between last week and this week's video, I actually added my third box right here. So I mentioned that I wanted to add that in the first round or the first episode, but I went ahead and just built it last night. Got some just some leaves that I raked up in here, and then some cardboard, some blank cardboard with no like tape or no paint on it in there. So that'll break down once I put the soil in, and it'll give some good like worm food at the bottom of the pile, just to kind of create that that organic biodegradable type soil that's going to feed the plants really well. But just getting into the setup and like where you want to grow. So my reason behind putting the garden beds on this side of the yard was so it can get as much sunlight as possible. That's what you really want to look for when you have a garden. You want to at least have 6 hours of full sun per year or per day. So what I did, like I was mentioning earlier, I was actually planning on putting the garden right there, my first garden bed right there. And then I realized after looking at the sun a couple days that the majority of the sun, or the majority of the day, the sun kind of hits this area, this entire area of the yard. This is the south side of my backyard. So that's what made me end up choosing this spot for the garden box. This one gets pretty much full light all day long. So in the middle of the summer, like the June months, I can expect for this box specifically to get about 12 hours of sunlight. So that's perfect for like tomatoes, cucumbers, like the summer crops. And then this one, my reason behind putting this one over here is just because it's a little bit shaded in the afternoon. So it's about mid-afternoon right now. You can already see how this part is shaded. One is because of this tree right here, and then it's just because of the angle of the sun. So this is a little bit better for like cooler season crops. I can also grow summer crops here and then put some cool season crops under here. But this is just the kind of setup that I wanted to show, just to show that like if you put it on the right side of the yard, the biggest thing about your garden, especially if you have it like in a garden bed like this, or if you have it in the ground, you don't want to put it somewhere where you're going to have to move it, because that's just going to be too much of a hassle. You really want to put it somewhere that's going to be able to stay and then continue to grow and be, become a better and better garden as the years go by. So that's kind of how I picked this setup on this side. These 3 garden beds get a good amount of sunlight all day long. And that's really the main thing that you're going to be looking for. Another tip I can give as well, based off of where you want to locate your garden, is make sure it has good access to water. So right on the other side of my fence is a water hose. I'm able to walk it back here really easily, and I like watering the plants by hand. You can set up an irrigation system, but I prefer to kind of come out here and check on the plants myself to make sure there's nothing wrong with them. But making sure that it has a good light source and then a good access to a good amount of water is really what you want to look for. All right, so for the next part, we got inventory, and I'm gonna switch the camera around again, and I'm gonna show what my inventory looks like and what kind of necessities that you're gonna need for your garden. You really don't need a lot. For the most part, plants only need good sun, good soil, and good water, and good access to water. But then you do have a couple like tools and a couple like different types of feeds and pest control that might help out like with your harvest. So I'm gonna flip the camera around and show what my inventory looks like and just kind of how I break those things up. And I'm gonna also show like a little bonus thing as well. There's some things that you have probably laying around your house already that you can, you know, reincorporate and reuse instead of having to like throw it away or recycle it. You can reuse it and put it in the garden and have like multiple years of like use out of it. So I'll quickly walk through my inventory. Right here is just all my seeds. I got them in like a little storage drawer, and I keep them in my garage. With seeds, you want to store them in somewhere that's cool, dark, and not going to be somewhere where they can degrade easily. But this is just like a big drawer full of seeds. I probably say I got, 30, 40 packets of seeds in here, and I'll probably be planting the majority of them. But that's just like a quick inventory of my seeds. These are some of my seed starting pots, so they're biodegradable pots. What I'll do is you can plant seeds directly. You can plant seeds in here and then plant the pod directly into wherever the final growing place is. So if you start like a pepper seed in here, you can grow it until it's too large to fit in there anymore, or until it's time to transplant it outside, and you can transplant the entire thing into the garden bed. And I have a video from last year that I can put in the description that shows quickly how to do that as well. These are pretty much the same thing, just smaller versions, about 1 inch big, but same exact concept. These are little pods, like they're made of like peat moss, I believe. And so what you do with these is there's like a little hole right there, and you would dampen it, you would kind of soak it in water, and then you would put a seed in there, and that's where it can germinate. And then this is also biodegradable as well. So as soon as the seedlings kind of come up, there's not a lot of nutrients in here, but as soon as the seedlings come up, you can transplant it to wherever it's going to grow, and then you can kind of just let it break down like while it's in the soil. Some other things that I try to keep on hand is some tools. So these are just some small hand tools, some garden tools, just like a cultivator, a couple trowels, and then they got like some measurements on them as well. That way you can know how deep you're planting something. It has it both in like millimeters or centimeters and inches as well. But just a couple trowels in different sizes for different different uses. Just some regular pots. These are some regular nursery pots. They are reusable. They're plastic. Clean them out, grow stuff in them just fine, no issue with them at all. I got about, I'll say probably about 15 of these, and then I got other ones that are currently being used. Like I'm holding some old leaf droppings that I raked up in there just so it can compost, and a couple plants up there in the greenhouse. But yeah, those are just some pots right there. I'll probably get a couple more. This is also where I'll start some seeds at as well too. So little seed pods. They're about 1 inch wide and I think about 2 to 3 inches tall. Not somewhere where you can grow vegetables for a long amount of time, but it's enough to at least get a couple, probably at least a month and a half of good growth before you need to transplant anything in the ground. So I'm gonna use this to be able to start a whole lot of seeds and give some seedlings away to some people locally. Here we got some of my fertilizers and some of my insecticides. So got some neem oil. I'm gonna probably stop using neem oil though. I just found out from one of the local garden shops I go to that if you spray neem oil when it's a hot day, it could actually burn the leaves. So I don't know how often I'll keep using that. I have some other type of insecticides. This is BT. This is basically a bacteria that helps with like caterpillars and moths. I don't really use a lot of insecticides, and if I do, I try to keep them organic. Everything I do use is organic, and it doesn't harm bees either. So this is a bee safe spray as well. It's a concentrate that you have to mix with water. But like I said, for the most part, I typically try to stay away from insecticides. I try to use more natural solutions, and just try to make an environment that it'll bring the predators that it needs to kill the bad pests. So, and then this is just like some liquid fertilizer. I tried this a little bit last year, and what I'm gonna have to do is buy some more like slow release, like solid fertilizer. I prefer that. I just think it feeds the plant better in my opinion. The liquid fertilizer, it just goes directly into the roots and you can overfeed it really easily. So I prefer to use like slow release solid feed. But this is just like a nitrogen feed, so you can see by the numbers right there. It's just a nitrogen feed, and then this is a phosphorus feed, and you can see by the numbers. So it's a 2:8:4 ratio. So basically what that is, 2 nitrogen, 8 phosphorus, and then 4 potassium. But yeah, those are my feeds right there, my insecticides. I probably not even really going to utilize them this much this year. I bought them all last year and just really haven't even used them like that. What else we got? I think that's pretty much it. Actually, I'll wrap around, I'll flip the camera over, or I'll switch over to my garage to show the rest of my tools as well too. So it's a little dark in here, but I just wanted to show like the rest of the tools that I use. This is just really for like the yard work. You know, just a couple rakes, lawnmower, weed eater, hedger, stuff like that. But these are the larger tools that I use in the garden. So I mean, this is just like a spade and a shovel. I really only use these whenever I'm trying to like turn. If I'm turning my beds a little bit, I use these just to kind of get, you know, real deep into the soil to flip it over. And when I'm turning my compost, I use those as well too. And then this is just a larger cultivator. It's the same exact thing as the small handheld one, but it's just larger. You got a little bit more leverage. You can work a larger area with it. And then this is the same thing, another little cultivator with like a little axe end on it. I don't know the technical term for this tool, but I use it pretty frequently. It's real strong. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up like the traditional garden tools. I'm gonna flip over one more time just to show a couple things that you probably already have in your house or your apartment or wherever you're at that you can use and you can utilize to grow things, or use it for another task within the garden. So hold on one second and I'll switch over to that next. So before you start to, you know, recycle or throw away like your plastic in your cartons, these are some things that I'm gonna reuse in the garden. So this is just a regular like gallon like milk container. What I'm gonna use this for is in the greenhouse. What you can do is you put water in here in like black containers. It'll hold heat and then it'll keep the greenhouse warm whenever it gets cool outside. So that's probably what I'll use these two things for. And then I'm gonna utilize this as another pot. You can pretty much use anything as a pot as long as it'll hold soil, hold water, and then you can put some drainage holes at the bottom. You can pretty much use anything as a pot. So I'll turn this into a pot too. Probably just keep it like on a windowsill or keep it in the garden and maybe grow some herbs or grow some baby like leafy vegetables like baby lettuce or baby spinach and stuff like that. But pretty much if you have anything that resembles anything like this, that's like just a container, before you recycle or throw it away, make use of it in your garden, because you'll be surprised at how much use I can get over these pretty much over the next 5 to 10 years. Since they're not biodegradable and they're not going to break down, I can get a whole lot of use out of them until they're just, you know, too raggedy to use. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on real quick too is a couple like coolers and storage bins. So these coolers I've had, I think one is like my old roommate in college. It's just been kind of sitting in my house the last couple years, and then I got a couple more I believe, but just utilizing older coolers. We don't use these at all anymore. So what I'm gonna use them for this year is to just mix my soil amendments. So anytime I'm trying to mix like pot and soil, so I might be making pot and soil from scratch, I can use this as a big container to mix it all together before I start filling up my pots. So I think that's what I'm gonna utilize these three you know, coolers and storage bins for. But you can like I said, you can pretty much use anything that has any type of container and can hold any type of growing medium and can hold any type of water and can put drainage holes in the bottom of it. You can use it as a you know, as like a pot in. You can use it as like a pot and supply, just as long as it can hold the soil and the water. So this kind of wraps up the inventory. All right, so for this part, basically what you're gonna do is, you know, take a list or make a list based off of the things that you just did in the past 3 sections. So you wanna, you know, make a list based off of what you wanna grow. If you don't have those seeds already, you need to add that to your list. If there's a certain type of tool that you don't have, or for a certain amount of pots that you need from your inventory check that you don't have already in your inventory, that's something that you need to add to the list. And then, you know, if you wanna, you know, build a raised garden bed, like maybe add in lumber or add in a way to get, you know, soil delivered to your house. Those are the things that you need to add to the list. So this list is basically a list that kind of ties the last 3 sections together. After, you know, updating this list, and it doesn't have to be perfect, what I found is, you know, don't try to buy everything all up at once if you don't really necessarily have to. Get the bare necessities and the basics of everything. So make sure you have all your tools, your soil, your feed, access to your water, and then access to your sun. If you have those things kind of already in place, there are going to be little things that you may have to buy like over the gardening season, but it's best to have those things in place and then maybe just add on things as you go. But this is the list in the section that's going to be able to tie all the last ones together. That way you can know that you'll have everything that you need to be able to have like a fruitful and a real good harvest and a good production throughout the summer. And so what I did, hopefully it kind of clears up, but so what I did is, this is the inventory that I have, the inventory that I took in the last section. And then what I did is I basically just wrote a list of the things that I need, or the areas that I wanted to update, or areas that I wanted to you know, kind of add to the garden this year. And then from there I went ahead and made that list. So here's that list right here. I wrote it in pencil, so it might not be clear, but it's real simple. It's not really complicated at all. You do is just write the list down, figure out where you can go get it from, maybe a local garden shop or a hardware store, and then write down what the cost is going to be and go get it. All right, so for the last part is the schedule, and you don't have to be perfect on the schedule. You might not plant things and feed things on the exact day like you always want to, but as long as you have like a range of dates and have a generic idea about which week it is for each plant, then you should be able to keep up with the nutrition and be able to kind of control the pests and be able to get a good harvest. But if there's anything that you remember about the schedule, is these main 2 dates. They're called frost dates. In the springtime, you have what's called the last frost date. And in the fall time, you have what's called a first frost date. And essentially what a frost date is, the last frost date is a date where the probability of the temperatures going below freezing is extremely low. And then the first frost date is where the probability of the temperature going below freezing starts to increase. So where I live in North Carolina the last frost date is April 8th, 2021. And then the first frost date of the year is October 29th. So if you do the math, it's about 203 days for the growing season. So the reason that that's important is some plants are frost hardy and some plants are not. So some plants are frost hardy, some plants are like frost sensitive, some plants are frost tolerant. The difference in those is frost hardy means like if it goes below freezing, it doesn't affect the plant's ability to produce and still grow, and it doesn't really stunt the growth of the plant. Frost tolerant means it can take frost, but it doesn't thrive in frost. So it's not something that you want to plant when it's freezing outside and it can just have a full good growing season through the frost. It's just not, it's tolerant of it, but it's not like something that'll thrive in it. And then you also have what's called frost sensitive. So if it's frost sensitive, that means pretty much it's not going to have any type of, it's not going to grow at all. It's going to be the growth is going to be stunted. You're not going to have any type of good production from it just because it can't handle that type of temperature. So with those dates, you'll know what days that you can actually grow things that don't have to worry about frost. So like tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, a lot of things, squash, zucchini, watermelon, a lot of things that are summer crops that can't grow in the frost. You know that you have 203 days. If you live in North Carolina, you have 203 days where you can grow these things. And it also helps you plan it out. So what I did to make mine really simple is I wrote my frost dates, and I don't know if it's real clear or not, but I wrote my frost dates. So my last frost date is April 8th, and then my first frost date is October 29th. And then what I did is I just backed up in different week intervals from those dates. So I got a 12-week before, I got a 9 weeks before, 6 weeks before, and 3 weeks before. And then the same for the fall dates as well, or for the first frost dates as well. And by writing these dates down, most things that I'm gonna plant that I need to transplant into the garden after the last frost date is over, I will be planting kind of in those like week intervals. So I might have to plant something between 10 to 12 weeks before the last frost date, or 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost date. If I know generically what dates those are, or just a good range of when those dates are, then I can plant things in the right week and then be able to feed them in the right week. And what I did at the bottom was I just broke down the things that I do need to plant in those months. So like January, I do want to start like my peppers and some of my herbs and tomatoes, eggplants, things like that. February, I'll start some other things. March, I'll transplant some stuff into the garden and I'll start a couple other seeds. And in April, I'll do a lot of planting and transplanting directly into the garden. And then May through July is whenever I'll be feeding all my plants in the garden. And then it's also when I'll be planning on starting like my fall crops as well. So yeah, the having a schedule is extremely important. It can really be the determining factor between having like a great harvest and not having a harvest at all, and even having multiple crops throughout the growing season. So making sure you're putting yourself on a schedule, taking the time to plan and put yourself on a good schedule is imperative. If you do that beforehand, you'll be pleased with the results that you'll get from the garden. All right, this pretty much wraps up this week's episode. If you got this far, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any new episodes. Real quick, I'm gonna give a 1 to 2 minute description of what I decided to do with the landscaping and show the layout that I drew. But next week's video, I'm gonna go into more detail about the growing medium, the importance of a good growing medium, and making sure that you got the right pH and nutrient content. So that way, when you're in the middle of your growing season, all you got to do is worry about having a big harvest. But until next time, guys, peace. So for the landscaping, as you can see, I've already gotten that process started. With the stones, I added some more, and then I added a garden box as well. I think for the next 3 months, I'm not going to actually do too much landscaping outside of getting the backyard steps level and evened out, and then filling in those holes with topsoil and grass seed. And then in the front yard, I went ahead and marked off where I was going to extend the flower bed. But I've decided that over the next 3 months, I'm going to focus mainly on getting my seedlings as strong as possible and getting the garden season and the produce up and ready. And then I'll focus on more of the landscaping, probably in the March and April and later on into the late spring months.